This is the motto of the show Hour of the Truth. Rome never changes. They used to call us heretics and sent the Inquisition to kill us. Today they call us terrorists and send on their crusades. Times and methods may have changed, the goal still stays the same. Extirpate the remnant of the true Word of God, Bible-believing people who uphold the truths in Jesus Christ's name.
From 1203 to 1805, 50 million Christians died, suffering at the hands of Rome, 'cause they believed in Christ alone. They died through Europe, especially Spain, for they saw all but Christ is vain. He suffered by his death for men, to save them from their awful sin. 600 years of martyred saints that history cannot erase. With iron heel and iron hand, the Roman popes rule the land. Those ignorant of history may be swept into apostasy. We won't be lulled by Rome's sweet lie, with 50 million reasons why. Salvation is by faith alone, in Christ alone, by grace alone. A sovereign God give faith to man. Salvation's in the Maker's hand. This gospel offends Rome today. They offer up another way, a counterfeit, a compromise. Beware the ancient papal lie, with such a cloud of witnesses who by grace died in their Lord. Recall their memory to say, by the same faith we live today.
Hello and welcome everybody to another broadcast on Hour of the Truth. I am as always Jörg Listmann from YouTube channel Jörg66, and together with my host Walt Stickel from the website Grand Design Exposed, here today on Thursday the 8th of October 2015. Before we get started with the broadcast that is scheduled dealing with the analysis of the Pope's speech to a joint session of Congress 14 days ago, I want to talk for a little moment about the problems that we are having here right now over here in Europe, because we are always talking about America, but be sure that we also have our problems right here. The article that I'm referring to is about a month old, from the 7th of September, but it is actually very, very up to date when you follow a little bit the news over here in Europe. This article comes from the dailymail.co.uk and is titled, "How Hundreds of Muslim Migrants Are Converting to quote-unquote Christianity," the quotes come from me, "to boost their chances of winning asylum in Germany. Iranian and Afghan asylum seekers are taking 3-month crash courses. Converting allows them to claim they would face persecution if sent home. And Germany is expecting around 800,000 migrants this year. This is a 300% increase compared to last year. And the latest numbers that I have heard the latest days that are going around in the newspapers of the, of course, totally Catholic-controlled mainstream media, are numbers of even 1.5 million refugees only for Germany, only in 2015. I'm going to read a little bit from the article here. And Walt, when you have a comment to make, please just say comment, interrupt me, and give your opinion on your point of view on this. Muslim migrants are converting to Christianity, I should really say quote unquote, in their droves in the hope it will greatly improve their chances of winning asylum in Germany. Hundreds of mostly Iranian and Afghan asylum seekers have changed faith in the Evangelical Trinity Church in a leafy Berlin neighborhood alone. Many claim true belief prompted the move, but the decision undoubtedly boosts their chances of being granted asylum by allowing them to claim they would face persecution if sent home. Germany expected about 2,500 refugees to arrive in the country by early afternoon today, so that was the 7th of September 2015, after some 20,000 came in over the last weekend. Chancellor Angela Merkel today, in September, remind you, described the influx as quote-unquote breathtaking and said it would change the makeup of the country forever. She said, quote, "What we are experiencing now is something that will occupy and change our country in the coming years," unquote. She said Germany will ensure that those who need protection receive it, but that those who stand no chance of getting asylum will have to return to their homes swiftly. Germany pledged an extra 6 billion euros, that's about at least $7 billion, Monday to help the record numbers of desperate refugees crossing its borders. At a baptism, Pastor Gottfried Martens asked one Iranian refugee, Mohammed Ali Zanubi, "Will you break away from Satan and his evil deeds? Will you break away from Islam?" To which he fervently replied, "Yes." Martens then baptized him in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost. Zunubi, a carpenter from the Iranian city of Shiraz, arrived in Germany with his wife and 2 children 5 months ago. Martens recognizes that some convert in order to improve their chances of staying in Germany, but for the pastor, motivation is unimportant. Many, he said, are so taken by the Christian message that it changes their lives, and he estimates that only about 10% of converts do not return to church after christening. I know there are, again and again, people coming here because they have some kind of hope regarding their asylum, Martin says. I'm inviting them to join us because I know that whoever comes here will not be left unchanged. Being Christian alone does not help an applicant, and Chancellor Angela Merkel went out of her way this week to reiterate that Islam, quote-unquote, belongs in Germany. But in Afghanistan and Iran, for example, conversion to Christianity by a Muslim could be punished by death or imprisonment, and it is therefore unlikely that Germany would deport converted Iranian and Afghan refugees back home. None will openly admit to converting in order to help their asylum chances. To do so, could result in rejection of their asylum bid and deportation as Christian converts. Several candidates for baptism at Martin's Church would not even give their names out of fear of repercussions for their families back home. Most said their decision was based on belief, but one young Iranian woman said she was convinced most people had joined the church only to improve their chances for asylum. Congregation member Wissam Haidari initially applied for asylum in Norway and converted there in 2009, 6 years ago, remind you. But his case was rejected because the Norwegian authorities did not believe he would be persecuted as a Christian in Iran. So he moved to Germany to seek refugee status there and is still awaiting a decision. He criticized many of the other Iranian church members, saying they were making it much harder for real persecuted Christians, like himself, to get approved for asylum. The majority of Iranians here are not converting out of belief, Haidari said. They only want to stay in Germany. Meanwhile, As other churches across Germany struggle with dwindling numbers of believers, Martens has seen his congregation swell from 150 just 2 years to more than 600 parishioners now, with a seemingly unending flow of new refugees finding the way to his congregation. Some come from cities as far as Rostock on the Baltic Sea, that's about 300 kilometers to Berlin, having found out by word of mouth that Martens is not only baptizes Muslims after a 3 months quote-unquote crash course in Christianity, but also helps them with asylum pleas. Other Christian communities across Germany, among them Lutheran churches and the Rhineland, have also reported growing numbers of Iranians converting to Christendom. There are no exact numbers on how many Muslims have converted in Germany in recent years, and they are a tiny minority compared to the country's overall 4 million Muslims. And Germany has about 82 million inhabitants, just reminding you. So that's already at least 5% of the whole population. The article continues, but at least for Berlin, Martens describes the number of conversions as nothing short of a miracle. And he says he has at least another 80 people, mostly refugees from Iran and a few Afghans, waiting to be baptized. Germany is witnessing an unprecedented surge of asylum seekers this year, with the number of migrants expected to reach 800,000 this year, a fourfold increase on last year. Many of the new arrivals come from Muslim countries such as Syria, Iraq, Afghanistan, or Pakistan. While refugees from civil war-torn Syria will almost definitely be receiving asylum status, the situation is more complicated for asylum seekers from Iran or Afghanistan, which are seen as more stable. In recent years, roughly 40 to 50% from those two countries have been allowed to stay in the country, with many of those getting only temporary permission to remain. Germany's Federal Office for Migration and Refugees said it does not comment on the reasons individual applicants give when they apply for asylum, or on how many people receive refugee status in Germany based on religious persecution. Zunubi, who dressed all in white for his baptism on Sunday, said he had attended secret religious services in Iran ever since friends introduced him to the Bible at the age of 18. He decided to flee to Germany after several Christian friends were arrested for practicing their religion. For Zunubi and his wife Afsne, who since her baptism goes by the name of Katharina, the christening marks a new beginning. Quote, "Now we are free and can be ourselves," unquote, she said. And she continues, "Most important, I am so happy that our children will have a good future here and can get a good education in Germany." This ends the article from September. In the meantime, I have to add that Angela Merkel already proposed that these refugees who will come over to Germany will all receive the sum of 690 euros per person per month. Now, when in Germany you are getting unemployment benefits because you have been unemployed for longer than a year, you will get about 450 euros. And these asylum seekers get 690 euros. When you think about it, this all leads up to an agenda to start civil war. And I saw today, uploaded by Dabu77, or whatever his name is, about riots of so-called refugees in Sweden going on already for 5 days continually. This refugee situation is just the situation, as I told you, it is right over here in this little part of Europe that I live. I mean, in Belgium, it's not that many for the moment, but also here they are coming, of course. But imagine over there in America, you have how many inhabitants you have in the United States of America? 320 million?
Yeah, approximately, yeah.
Approximately 320 million.
Mm-hmm.
Now, think about that. About 1% of that population each year would be filled with Muslims. What would that do to your country? What would that do to your culture that has been hijacked anyway?
Well,
I mean, on this article that I've just read, I could do an expose of about at least 2 hours about it.
I have a comment, too, on that.
Yeah, please, Walt.
Well, too, first of all, I want to welcome Dave Baxter. He's with us today because we're going to be going over Pope's speech, the second half of the Pope's speech. But this is very interesting. The fact that the migration, what they're doing, is almost identical to the Mexicans in the United States. The border is wide open, and they're doing the same thing. And I wanted to ask you a question. What do you know the unemployment rate that's in Europe there right now?
Well, the problem with the unemployment rate over here is that all these numbers are false. They don't give us the real numbers. For example, in Germany, officially, the unemployment rate is about 6.3%. But that leaves out all the people who are in some kind of governmental plan of re-education. That leaves out all the people who have been looking for work for, I think, longer than 2 years because they don't receive anything anymore. There's a so-called Dunkelziffer, we say that here, so it means not counted people who are probably in the hundreds of thousands who don't count. So the official number is about 6.3%, but I can assure you that when you go after the real numbers, you will come out of at least 10%. We have countries over here in Germany, like in Spain, where the youth unemployment rate is above and far above 30%, where the overall unemployment rate is about 10 to 15%, and that's admitted officially. So even there, you have to count all the people who are not counted in already. Here in Belgium, it must be something about the same. As you know, I don't follow Belgian newspapers and Belgian news because I don't care for that. My kingdom is with Jesus Christ and not here, and I don't care. Anything can happen here. I don't care what happens, but I want to make other people knowledgeable of the situation that is also over here. We are always talking on our broadcasts about America, and I don't think that is so wrong, but sometimes I want to remind them in what kind of a dilemma we are over here in Europe too. You know, the problem is, Walt, these people who come from these countries that I was just mentioning in this article. You know, they mention in this article people coming from Syria, from Iran, Afghanistan, and Iraq. First of all, people do not need to flee Iraq if it was not for the meddling of the United States in that country in the first place. Second of all, people would not come over from Afghanistan if it was not for the meddling of the United States in the first place.
What you're talking about is the Papal Army.
Yeah, of course, because the American soldiers are all over the world out on crusades for the Pope. What, of course, is not told to them, but they should understand when they understand history, which is why we are on this call and trying to tell these poor souls a little bit more about the real history and the real truths. They are all papal crusades that are fought all over the world, and George W. Bush said that himself on September 17th in 2001, speaking of a crusade.
Well,
And crusades were always fought by the Roman Catholic Church, which is, I remind you again, not Christian. But the point being is they are having refugees from Iraq, which they would not have if it wasn't for the intervenience of the United States of America over there, from Afghanistan for the same reason. Now they are having them from Syria and also from Iran. I don't even understand Iran because Iran is normally a very liberal country concerning religious liberty, because I know that in Iran there is also a very strong Jewish stronghold, and they aren't even persecuted there. Yeah? But the point being is, when these people flee their countries, they have to go via Turkey. They come via Turkey, which is another Muslim country. And they also have states in the Gulf area like Bahrain, Qatar, Saudi Arabia. Why don't all these countries take up some refugees, do you think? That is all part of the plan. If I was a real refugee from the country of Syria or the country of Afghanistan or whatever, why would I go and try to seek my luck thousands and thousands of miles away in Germany with a totally different language and culture and everything, instead of a few hundred miles away, maybe go over to Pakistan or go over to Saudi Arabia or other Muslim countries where I know that my faith is accepted? But then again, we have to deal and we have to see that we are dealing here with two different sects of Islam. We have the Shiites and we have the Sunnites.
Yeah,
and the Shia, yeah.
Well, listen, let's not forget the most important part of when you started that article. There's masses converting to Christianity.
So-called Christianity.
So-called Christianity. And we know today that evangelicals are Roman Catholic. They're Universalist.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if they convert to Catholicism or if they go to one of the Lutheran churches or whatever.
It doesn't matter.
It's all the same. It's all the same. I know. It's all the same. But the point being, they say, when they are baptized into so-called Christianity over here in Germany, that would boost their chance of being granted asylum, because if they returned as a converted quote-unquote Christian into their home country, they would undergo persecution there. That's the point.
And what they're doing is it's kind of like a melting pot. They're picking on Germany again to completely destroy any kind of sign of the Protestant movement, which they have done. World War I and World War II pretty much did in the Protestants in Europe.
Well, you have to see that after World War II, with the splitting up of the state of the state or the country of Germany, I can't even say that because the real Reich of Germany, the Empire of Germany, still exists. But that's another question. But they split up Germany in two parts, Western and Eastern. And the Eastern part was traditionally always a stronghold of the Reformation, of Protestantism. Martin Luther came from Eisenach and all these cities over there in the East. And they made these countries for 40 years, or even a little bit longer than 40 years, from 45 to 90, 45 years, they made them atheist. It's the same that they had over there in Russia. With the revolution in Russia in 1915 and the communists taking over, they started to eliminate the Orthodox Church that was already in war with the Vatican since 1054, for almost 1,000 years. And they crushed their belief system in the time of communism. And they did the same with Protestantism in Eastern Germany in that time. And in Western Germany, they got all the so-called remnant of Protestants in the meantime, of course, ecumenalized with the ecumenic system, with their with the ecumenical movement that started not exactly with Vatican II already before, but Vatican II was the absolute latest starting point of that. That was the time that I was born. I'm born in 66 and Vatican II ended in 65. So they have had since then 2 generations, or even after the war, now almost 4 generations, that have not been raised under Protestant thinking anymore. German Protestantism is completely out of line today. There is no protest anymore in Germany. As also, there is no real protest over there in the United States of America anymore.
No, I mean,
it's the same. It's the same. They've done to us what they've done to you. But they've done to us with also military power and world wars coming over. And at least 66 million people died during World War II. And I think it is not exaggerated when I say that at least 20 million of those were German. And America has never experienced something like that. And as you quite rightfully said, you have the immigration of Roman Catholics from Mexico, from the southern border, into the United States of America. Not in that high numbers as we have in Europe right now, but still you have them, and they're coming, and they're coming. There's just no stopping of them. And when they have enough of Mexico, then they're going to take them from Brazil, and they're going to take them from Argentina, and they're going to take them from Guatemala, and from every other Roman Catholic country in Latin America. That's why it's called Latin America, to achieve their goal. But with us, it's even worse, because all the people, and I've read another article today about these refugees, that there are only more than 65% of all these refugees that are coming are men. They are not families with children. It's only 20% of the people coming in are women, and the rest are children, and more than 60% are men, mostly young men. And you know, as well as I know, as well as probably everybody on the show knows, that these men are very often covert terrorists, trained by Blackwater, XE, whatever the name, by the Mujahideen or Al-Qaeda or whatever name you want to give on the organization that is pumped up with money through the U.S. and British intelligence services. And they are coming in with probably false passports or not any passport at all, so we cannot even say who these people are. And this will give the governments a wonderful possibility now to start false flags, terrorist attacks, to start riots all over the place, which of course you will never hear in the mainstream media that these are planned. But we who can look behind the scenes know that all these are planned. And they are not planning the same over there in the United States of America. They are just trying to fill more Catholics into a so-called former Protestant country, where there is no real protest anymore.
Well, you know, something that's come to me this last month, and I'm glad we're talking about of Europe. Yeah, we've talked a lot about the United States, and it's time to give a little equal time, because we know who controlled the First Reich. It was the Holy Roman Empire, and Europe today is the Holy Roman Empire.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, it's a revived Holy Roman Empire. There is absolutely no doubt about that.
It's not even up for question.
Have a look at Angela Merkel. Angela Merkel is the chairman of the Christian Democratic Union, which is the descendant of the Centrum Party, the party where Van Papen came out, the Knight of Malta, who pushed Hitler into chancellorship. So she is so-called, really, quote unquote, Angela Merkel is the daughter of a pastor, of a Protestant pastor from East Germany. But in East Germany, Protestantism was completely under restriction of communism at that time. So you know what kind of daughter Angela Merkel really is. She went over and kissed the Pope's foot and ring and probably mouth and I don't know what else many times that probably you and I could count together. She is an absolute whore, a harlot of the whore of Babylon. And she not alone. The same is today in France, the same is today in the UK. They are all just puppets of the Pope. In Europe, we have to admit today, there is no clear Protestant voice anymore. Europe, the European Union, with all its 27, 28, I don't know how many nations they got for the moment, because they wrap them up day by day and grows. All these are in the European Union today, are in the kingdom of Antichrist, in the complete Holy Roman Empire, where the Pope rules absolutely supreme. And there's only a few voices in Europe.
Yeah.
I only know mine. I don't know many more.
Yeah.
No, there are a few Protestant voices over here, but not so many anymore. And that's it. They got us completely, and now they are going to get you.
Well, let's talk about a word, universalism. We hear that all the time, universalism. And when you think of universalism, you have to feed in the evangelicals. They're universalist. They're Roman Catholic. But they've also, with their mind control, say, Dave, could you explain a little bit how atheism fits in with their agenda, the mindset of an atheist, and how it fits in with a universalist?
Okay. Restate the question so I can be a little bit more.
Well, we've talked about this before, and it fits right in. In other words, the mindset of a postmodern, a mindset of an atheist. It's a universalist. In other words, with the Pope's visit over here and the agenda of global warming and these left-wing programs, and how atheism fits right in with Catholicism, with universalism.
Well, it's pretty easy to understand. Rome controls the educational system, therefore they control the doctrine, what is taught. And what starts there when you go to a college or university is the same method that is used. Because Rome doesn't care who you worship, okay? And that way they're like the Roman Empire, put them up with all the other gods. Okay, as long as you do not worship the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. That's intolerable. And that's a similarity that's shared right there at the very start with the postmoderns. But their pattern of thinking is set then, where evidence doesn't matter. Evidence isn't that important. Okay, you have preconceived conclusions that you want to validate. And that is the evidence that you will accept, but you must omit vast amounts of valid information, valid evidence. And it's that pattern of thinking that brings them along, and they can bring them along the same method of reasoning. And they have set them up. I mean, they definitely want a new economic system here in America. Okay, capitalism is bad, 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 bad. There has to be something new. That's something that Rome wants.
Yeah, that's going to be the synthesis between capitalism on the one hand and communism on the other hand.
Right.
That is a fascist-controlled society where all the big companies are hand in hand with the governments, because that, according to Mussolini, is fascism. And all the people are giving almost equal pay, and that's communism. So you have fascism on the top, communism on the ground floor, and that is the kind of synthesis they are working for.
Right. Alluding to the Pope's speech, he mentions Dorothy Day and her social teachings, which is based upon Roman Catholic social teachings, which has its own economic theory called distributism, which is neither of the above, and it's a blending of the two. And that's their synthesis that they want to create, and they're using climate change, global warming, as a way to bring in, they have already established a carbon tax. There's futures being traded on, I understand, and to redistribute the wealth. So they've already planted the seeds and they've watered the seeds, and they are ready, and they will call and readily accept these doctrines that are actually Rome's, that they're unaware of. Does that answer your question, Walt? Or another aspect you want to talk about?
Yes. Well, in other words, see what I see as I've listened to Leon Pittard on Fair Dinkum Radio in Australia. They're doing this in Europe. They're doing this in America. They're creating a global mind, in this universal thinking. And
yeah, and one of the points, sorry to interrupt you, Walt, but one of the points is that they say and they teach that home is wherever you are. Not where you come from, not where your roots are, but wherever you are right now. And that is the agenda of the German government very clearly with these refugees. They say, we are going to give them a new home. We're going to make them a home. And when Angela Merkel says that Islam belongs to Germany, like Gauck also said, that's the president of Germany, who, by the way, was one of these days with your American president meeting, I think it was yesterday or the day before. And he repeatedly states Islam belongs to Germany. Where did he get that from? But from a global mind, as Dave so rightfully stated. Yeah. It's a global mind. There is no nationality anymore. And with no nationality, you have no roots and no culture and no background anymore. And that's exactly what they want. They want the whole world being lost without any culture, without any background. Everyone can live with everyone and do anything they want. And that is all the teaching coming right out of Alice Bailey, Helena Blavatsky, and the whole New Age movement that is being provided by the United Nations since 1945, 70 years, as the Pope mentioned in his speech to Congress and in his speech to the United Nations Address Assembly. But please continue. I don't want to interrupt you, but I think that was quite an interesting point there.
Well, because the word Protestant, this is real important for all of us. There's only a few Protestants left, and at every facet, using education, and we have to, and there's two things that couple with the word Protestant. You see, the Protestant view came from the Bible. The Bible is what liberated Europe.
Yeah, so take the Bible away and you take Protestantism away.
And that, like in Tupper Saucy's book, the cornerstone of learning in the original 13 colonies was the cornerstone of learning. And so I just came upon this morning. A couple broadcasts back, I talked about the hidden faith of the founding fathers, the Pinto, Chris Pinto made. It took me the last couple months, it keeps coming back to me. And finally the question is, what is the hidden faith of the founding fathers? Well, this morning, I remember Dave, years ago, one time said, Walt, it's bigger than Roman Catholicism. And see, the answer to that, what was the hidden faith of the founding fathers? They came out of the Enlightenment, out of Voltairism. They were universalists. It's Mystery Babylon, the mother of harlots. And Islam is just another harlot of Rome. They're the ones that created it.
Of course, when all these Muslim people come over to Germany and are being baptized into the Roman Catholic Church, they just go from one evil to another. And that's why I made this emphasis when I read this sentence of the pastor who asked this Sunusi guy, do you want to repent of evil? Do you repent from Islam? He said, yes, that's easy when you come to the Roman Catholic Church, you know.
But the social engineering that the Jesuits set up here in the United States is second to none. Because at the time of 1776, they had been suppressed in 1773. They were supposedly dispersed. They vanished like a fart. But we all know that they didn't vanish. And they needed a place that they could be unhindered. And they couldn't be suppressed. This is the hardest thing for Americans and Europeans and even Catholics to understand. The hardest thing to understand, and the reason for the founding of America, was to counter the Reformation, to get rid of those 99% Protestants in America. Here's 13 colonies. And out of those 13 colonies, 99% were Protestants. They weren't futurists. But this also came to me this morning. Less than 1% of them were futurists. Because Roman Catholicism, they teach futurism. They are futurists. That was the seed. That one seed bloomed into 2015, where we got a Jesuit that came to speak, and it was the very reason he came to speak in the Capitolium. He came to speak in a temple. That Washington Capitol is not a building to house that houses politicians. It's a temple. It's a temple of worship. And what I'm saying is this: you cannot deny now that the Pope has come over here and spoke to a joint session of Congress, and he's sitting there with right in the middle of two fasci symbols. And you can't deny that George Washington is in the rotunda. And what do you call that, York? It's the
apotheosis.
Yes, they deified George Washington, and I'm saying this today. That was the goal from the very beginning, to have the Pope come over there and speak in his temple. That Capitol building in Washington, D.C. is just another basilica.
Absolutely. I made that point, I think, in the last broadcast that we did about that.
But
that it's just another temple of Jupiter, like the basilica in the Vatican.
And you know, what I find sometimes when I talk to Dave, Dave's read some of this. What's this book called? It's called Psycho-Heresy, and I forget the name of that author. But Dave, I'm going to ask you a question. Explain a little bit how Ignatius Loyola's spirituality and how it works in contemplative prayer and some of this. And it's not only in in the Catholic circles, but it's in the charismatic. But can you explain a little bit about contemplative prayer?
Well, we touched on it a little bit with the universal mind. It's the method that they use in delivering information. If you take the postmoderns, who generally come out of a college or university setting, now that's nothing more than an endurance and a memory test, because they throw so much information at you so fast that you can't process it. You merely store the information unprocessed so that you can retrieve it for an exam. You've heard cramming for an exam. Well, that's exactly what you're doing. You're not processing. You're not thinking about the information that you're putting in there. You're cramming it into memory. And it's the same process on a much deeper scale, no matter what you call it. Contemplative prayer, hypnosis is the same mechanism. Spiritual exercises of Loyola.
It's what they use with the television also, when they put you in alpha state.
Right. Well, that's the whole purpose of that aspect, is to put you into a trance or an altered state of consciousness, where the information that you're taking in isn't being fully processed. It's just being stored. Because you have essentially 4 really dominant brain waves, and they're always present, and there's others, but I'm just talking about these. And one is always dominant. And the 3 I'll just briefly touch on would be the alpha, beta, and the delta. And beta, right now, I'm in beta because I'm engaged in talking and in reasoning. Okay? And then on the other end, you have delta, which is sleep. And then in between these two, you have the alpha. Okay? And this is actually a measurement of the electrical activity in your mind in cycles. And it's very dramatic, the difference between the top and the bottom. And it's the alpha state in which the hypnotist will put you into an alpha state where you're very open to suggestibility. Now, this is the same thing that happens with contemplative prayer or meditation of any type. That's nothing more than a self-induced hypnotic trance. And the whole purpose is to stop the conscious mind from thinking, processing information.
It's the same way the schools work.
Well, exactly, by repetition.
You just store up information without thinking about it and without having the possibility to connecting the dots. And if you allow me, I would really like to read this part of the Signs of the Times today, because that deals with the education and how it was taken over by the Jesuits. So if you allow me, I would really like to read this right now. It's not that long.
Perfect.
But it's going to take a few minutes, and I really want you two brothers to comment on that. And, of course, everybody in the chat room, please also, when you have something to contribute to that, please do so. We are always open for your comments and your suggestions. It starts with a quote from Jeremiah J. Crowley, who was an ex-Catholic priest in his book Romanism, A Menace to the Nation. Quote, today, and that was 1912, they, the Jesuits, are stronger in the United States than ever were in any of the countries of Europe, which expelled them as a menace to the government. Unquote. The next quote comes from Boyd Barrett, also an ex-Jesuit priest, from his book The Jesuit Enigma, printed in 1927, page 32. Quote, an interesting proof of Jesuit prestige and power in this country, America, is the existence in the shadow of the Capitol at Washington of the Jesuit School for Foreign Service, opened a few years ago through the instrumentality of an Irish-American, Father Edmund Walsh, from the Society of Jesus, and Walt knows him very well. At this school of diplomatic service, said to be the largest of its kind in America, young Americans are trained to guide the future fortunes of the Republic. There is no small irony in this situation. It is quite within the power of the general to dictate the principles and theories to be taught by the Jesuits at Washington. One cannot forget the words of Pope Clement XIV, who accused them of, quote, rising up against the very kings who admitted them into their countries, unquote. Now, in 1953, Norman Dodd, a New York investment banker, was chosen to be the research director for the Rees Committee, that is a House of Representatives committee that was investigating the status of tax-exempt foundations. In the course of Norman Dodd's investigations, the Carnegie Foundation allowed access to their records for a period of 2 weeks. An examination of the minutes revealed the following facts. First, in 1908, when the foundation was created, the first thing the trustees discussed was how to alter the whole society of the United States by social engineering. Point 2. They concluded that the best option for altering society was war. 3. They further concluded that in order to get America into a war, they would have to infiltrate and take over the State Department, the Foreign Office of the U.S. government. 4. The minutes also revealed that during World War I, the trustees sent a telegram to President Wilson advising him not to allow the war to end too early so that the changes they wanted to see could take place. 5. After World War I, the minutes revealed that the trustees were anxious that the U.S. not revert back to the conditions prior to World War I. In order to prevent reversion, they concluded that they would have to control public education in America. 6. They considered that controlling education was a large task, so they approached the Rockefeller Foundation and an agreement was reached to share the task. 7. The first thing they did was to enlist further assistance from the Guggenheim Foundation, which specialized in providing university scholarships. 8. Guggenheim agreed to sponsor only those students recommended by Carnegie and Rockefeller. The long-term goal was to alter the teaching of American history. These were these 8 points, and I want to remind you that the most important Guggenheim member died in the sinking of the Titanic in 1912 because he was against the founding of the Federal Reserve. And as you can see, his heirs understood who were responsible for the sinking of the Titanic. So they agreed to sponsor only those students recommended by Carnegie and Rockefeller. Now, the long-term goal was to alter the teaching of American history. But why history? Lenin said, and Lenin was Jesuit educated, quote, "If you control the past, you control the future. And if you control the present, then you control the past," unquote. In other words, if you can alter the way people see and understand the past, you can steer them and society as a whole in a certain direction and dictate the future. A U.S. Senator recognized already in 1928 that the history of the Roman Catholic Church and its past atrocities and abuses were no longer part of the school history curriculum. Here follows a quote from Thomas E. Watson, U.S. Senator, who wrote Roman Catholics in America, Falsifying History and Poisoning the Minds of Protestant School Children from 1928, page 5. Quote, "In the public schools, the Catholics have stealthily introduced textbooks written by Jesuits, and your children are being taught that the Roman Church was misunderstood in the past, that its doctrines are not fatal to humanity and gospel religion, that its record is not saturated with the blood of innocent millions murdered by the papal persecutors, and that there never was such a monstrosity as the alleged sale of papal pardons of sins," unquote. There's already a lot of comments we could do on this little thing, I think, but I'm going to continue. It's only 2 more little paragraphs. What this indicates is that the foundations of the Jesuits are natural allies. that the foundations and the Jesuits are natural allies. Sorry. They both want to radically alter the American Republic and the whole of American society. This radical social engineering is not confined to history or education in general. For example, the foundations control all aspects of the medical profession also. The Jesuits and the foundations have seized all the levers that can be pulled and all the buttons that can be pushed to achieve their goal. And their ultimate goal is the socialization of American society. Dodd was personally told by the head of the Carnegie Foundation that the ultimate goal of the foundations was to bring America into harmony with the Soviet system, as practiced by the old Soviet Union. You remember what I told you earlier in this broadcast? This goal necessitated the dumbing down of the education system. David Rockefeller famously said, quote, "I don't want a nation of thinkers, I want a nation of workers," unquote, just like the Soviet system of communism had. In addition, and pursuant to these goals, the socialization of America, the Jesuits have their own extensive network of schools, colleges, and universities, and the Catholic Church has an even bigger network. The Jesuits have always used education to further their goals. They were once called the schoolmasters of Europe, and they are still rated highly by many as the greatest educationalists. Georgetown University in Washington, D.C. is a classic example of the power and influence of Jesuit education. If a young American aspires to a career with the U.S. government, the State Department's most prestigious career path, then Georgetown School for Foreign Service, by Edmund Walsh founded, I remind you, is considered to be a virtual guarantee for future employment with the State Department. What did the Carnegie trustees seek to capture and control? That's right, the State Department. The foundations and the Jesuits are natural allies. They both want to alter the American Republic, and they are both successfully doing it through education.
I don't think you could have read anything that's more appropriate for the time this what we've been talking about.
Thanks, Walt. It's the Holy Spirit. It's the Holy Spirit leading me up to this. Now, I thought the same when I overflew this. And then we took this direction in the broadcast, and I said, it's really fitting. It's really fitting.
Well, the one comment, you see, I don't know when that was written, but he says that's how they're working to take over America. And I don't say this with animosity or I'm to be smart or funny, but they have taken over America.
They have. And I personally found one sentence here, the dumbing down of the education system. This goal necessitated the dumbing down of the education system. You know, there's a book out by a woman of, I think her name is Charlene Eiserbeit, The Deliberate Dumbing Down of America. You can get that as PDF on the internet still today. And she talks a lot of truth in there in that book.
Well, there's a lot of truth in that book, but there's a lot of filler in that book. In other words, we can cut through. Who is behind, say, Ignatius Loyola's spiritual exercises? This is people. When you talk about the Jesuits, they think, and it's an army. Like the definition how Napoleon is, they're not a religious organization. They are an army, but they are using education, and they have captivated education with Ignatius Loyola's spirituality. The ministers are teaching spiritual formation. I have a book right here to my side. I was shocked a couple years ago. It's called Relational Christianity by Steve Meeks. And if you go to his website, he'll tell you right there in his website that he is teaching spiritual formation. And then I did a little search, and you can go to Jesuit University. It was the one down in California, but they omit that they're the ones that are teaching this. And here is a minister, and I heard him with my own ears. He says this was the favorite book in his library, and it's called Relational Christianity, which is spiritual formation. So, when we talk about the Jesuits sometimes, we're skipping over this. How did they do it? They did it through education. And that little article that York just read, he mentions the Jesuits, but they are the cornerstone in this country. I mean, there are 28 universities, and by the way, there was 11. The country was founded the Declaration of Independence was 1776. By the beginning of the Civil War, there were 11. There were 11 Jesuit universities. And by 1900, there was 20. 20. There's only been 2 new universities in the last 100 years. And I'm sure they would build another one if it was necessary, if they felt necessary.
Why isn't that necessary, Walt? Because all the other universities follow the same goal and the same curriculum in the teaching. So they do not even have to come out as Jesuit schools because the other schools are teaching the same stuff. It's like with the churches. You have the mother church, the whore of Babylon, and you have all her harlots. And you have the Jesuit education, and you have all her harlots. All the other public schools are just the harlots of the Jesuit education system, whether it's high school or university.
And it's the most chilling part of my day. I live in a rural area out of a little town. But when that yellow school bus comes in the morning and leaves, I have this, it's a sinking feeling because they're not getting any history. And how did they do it? How did they, 1776 was the most sophisticated deception in American history.
Yeah, when you talk about the school bus that passes in the morning, I never can help to think of the story of Pinocchio. Are you familiar with Pinocchio?
Yes, I remember. I can't tell.
When Pinocchio was on his journey, he also went into that kind of a school bus. And they all went, instead of school, they went to a kind of amusement park, or they were told they'd get there. And they were only having fun. And that's exactly what all the schools are today. They are not about educating. They are about just spending time indoctrinating with spiritual exercises the little children and the bigger children.
And, when I
building an army.
Yeah, and it's built. And I didn't mention the 50 Jesuit high schools.
You didn't need to.
That are in the United States.
We understand they are there, Walt.
But this is the nerve. This is the nerve. So we scheduled this, and we were going to talk about the Pope's speech. But the Pope's speech is what it is. The only way that the Pope could come over here, a Jesuit Pope could come to his temple in Washington, D.C., he was right at home when he walked into that temple.
Well, that he could come is just the fact that futurism worked. Because there is no protest anymore, and all the so-called Protestants are by the ecumenical and charismatic movement brainwashed into thinking that the Antichrist is just one lonely figure that will come in the future.
Look.
And now, and this is the point that Tom Press always makes on reading Global Vatican, now the Pope says, so when all of you people do not believe anymore that that the papacy is the Antichrist, then you have been in error for the last 500 years or 400 years, and you have to restore me to my former glory. And that's exactly what this whole program of a speech before joint session of Congress and the speech in the United Nations was, to restore the papacy in the old glory that they had, by him, the Pope, ruling the known part of the world, the important part of the world at that time. And this time, it's going to be the whole world, as we can read in Revelation 13. And the whole world wondered after the beast, because nobody identified the beast as the Antichrist anymore. Well, maybe this is a good moment to give it over to Dave, that he could start reading again from the speech of the Pope, but I don't want to intervene with anything you have to say first of all, maybe.
Well, no, I think this is a good time. This is a good time if you'd like to start there where we left off last week, and we can finish off the last half hour here on the, we didn't give the Pope equal time this time, but I think he rightfully doesn't deserve equal time.
Walt, all we were speaking about all this time in the broadcast is about the Pope and his policy.
Well, and his army. We were talking about his army generals, the Jesuits, they're and how they do it. I mean, people, I know a lot of people, I was on a broadcast, and we were on a broadcast the other day, and somebody got a negative feedback and said, well, why are you so interested in the Catholics? Well, because the mother of harlots runs this country. That's why it's important to know now. I mean, it's I guess, one of my questions is, I was going to put it up to both of you guys, it's a question neither one of you have been prepared for, but the question I have, this is, as a researcher and the people that listen to Hour of the Truth are not just the ordinary, they're children of God, and they're into the Bible, and they know the Bible, or they couldn't listen to an hour and a half of Hour of the Truth. But since we know this, since we know the Protestant Reformation, the protest, I mean, the light in a child of God will never be stamped out. But we know, like you just said, York, the whole world will wonder after the beast. Now that we know that, I'm talking to the people on these listeners, because we are spread out. We're not going to change nothing. But I'm going to ask you this question, and I'll have an answer. I want to comment on it too. Since it's been a week, it's been 2 weeks now, I think, since the Pope spoke. How has this changed your outlook with your relationship with your Commander-in-Chief, Jesus Christ?
Oh, it only makes me stronger, Wolf. Minute by minute and hour by hour.
Yeah. And Dave?
Well, to sum up what we've been talking about, you can see that they're building an army against God. And this fits with prophecy, the whole prophecy. The widespread apostasy in the like mindset against God. And the Pope, in his own words, reaffirms it if you look closely at what he said and tells you what they want to do. And it was very well received.
Yeah.
Yeah, if God looks down today to the earth, it is like in the times of Babel, where they built the tower, and he looked down on the earth and said, look, the people have become one. And we are in the same stage today. Only a few thousand years later, we are in the absolute end game right now. And the battle of good and evil, which is a spiritual battle and not a carnal battle that we are fighting here on the earth, but it's a spiritual battle, goes into the end phase. And the only choice that you have of surviving is choosing the right side. Either you're on the side of Jesus or on the side of the devil. There is no in between.
Mm-hmm.
And we are here to lead you to the side of Jesus.
Well, and
you know what I thought of the first heard the Pope's speech and read it? What immediately came to mind was Daniel 11, and the King of the North, King of the South, and when you view that as a mirrorism of including everything in between, with the King of the North being Rome, the King of the South being secular. And I thought of verse 27, and I'll read it. And both these kings' hearts shall be to do mischief, and they will speak lies at one table, but shall not prosper, for yet the end shall be at the time appointed. So here you cannot deny that they're sitting and speaking at what speaking lies and taking counsel together and making deals. So you get a sense of where we are prophetically. We're told that it will not prosper, for the end shall be at the time appointed by God.
Well, Dave, will you allow me to read a little bit from an email you sent to me some time ago concerning the Pope's address to a joint session of Congress? Because you didn't bring that up last time from the reading, I'd like to bring that up right now, and maybe then we can continue doing the reading at least for a little bit on the show today. But allow me, please, to read from your email that you sent to me on the 24th of September. This is from the Pope's address to a joint session of Congress, a part that was already read by Dave last week. Quote, all of us are quite aware and deeply worried by the disturbing social and political situation on the world today. Our world is increasingly a place of violent conflict, hatred, and brutal atrocities committed even in the name of God and of religion. We know that no religion is immune from forms of individual delusion or ideological extremism. This means that we must be especially attentive to every type of fundamentalism, whether religious or of any other kind. A delicate balance is required to combat violence perpetrated in the name of a religion and ideology or an economic system, while also safeguarding religious freedom, intellectual freedom, and individual freedoms. But there is another temptation which we must especially guard against, the simplistic reductionism which sees only good or evil, or, if you will, the righteous and sinners. The contemporary world, with its open wounds which affect so many of our brothers and sisters, demands that we confront every form of polarization which would divide it into these two camps. End quote from the Pope. Now, Dave wrote, the Pope demands war on those who would divide the righteous from the sinners. Is this not what the whole of Scripture demands? Is this not a declaration of war against the Lord Almighty himself? How can this be understood any other way? And for confirmation, I'm going to read to you from 2 Corinthians chapter 6, verse 16 through 18. Quote, and what agreement hath the temple of God with idols? For ye are the temple of the living God. as God hath said. I will dwell in them and walk in them, and I will be their God, and they shall be my people. Wherefore come out from among them, and be ye separate, saith the Lord, and touch not the unclean thing, and I will receive you, and will be a father unto you, and ye shall be my sons and daughters, saith the Lord Almighty. End quote. You did quite a good job with that, and I think that had to be read here. And I think that is a nice going over now to maybe reading another little part of the Pope's speech. We'll probably not finish that all today because we are already a little bit time in the broadcast and we want to keep it at about an hour and a half. But still, I think you should continue, Dave. Or is there anything else you or Walt wants to say before now?
No, I can start at any time.
Okay, then go.
Well, here's where we left off. Here, too, I think of the march which Martin Luther King led from Selma to Montgomery 50 years ago as part of the campaign to fulfill his dream, a full civil and political rights for African Americans. That dream continues to inspire us all. I am happy that America continues to be, for many, a land of dreams, dreams which lead to action, to participation, to commitment, dreams which awaken what is deepest and truest in the life of a people. In recent centuries, millions of people came to this land to pursue their dream of building a future in freedom. We, the people of this continent, are not fearful of foreigners because most of us were once foreigners. I say this to you as the son of immigrants, knowing that so many of you are also descendant from immigrants. Tragically, the rights of those who were here long before us were not always respected. For those people and their nations, from the heart of American democracy, I wish to affirm my highest esteem and appreciation. Those first contacts were often turbulent and violent, but it is difficult to judge the past by the criteria of the present. Nonetheless, when the stranger in our midst appeals to us, we must not repeat the sins and errors of the past. We must resolve now to live nobly and justly as possible, as we educate new generations not to turn their back on our neighbors in everything around us. Building a nation calls us to recognize that we must constantly relate to others, rejecting a mindset of hostility in order to adopt one of the reciprocal subsidiarities in a constant effort to do our best. I'm confident that we can do this.
Comment, please.
Absolutely.
I think that this paragraph resembles a lot of the things that we are talking about today. When he refers to, I say this to you as the son of immigrants, knowing that so many of you are also descendant from immigrants, and now you have all the immigrants coming into the United States of America and saying, and you know always when the dragon speaks, he says the one but means the other. He says, nonetheless, when a stranger in our midst appeals to us, we must not repeat the sins and errors in the past. Well, that's exactly what's going to happen. You are over there in the United States of America not building a nation anymore. You have built a nation already. Now the Pope is going to take that nation down with immigrants, and you will have the same bloodshed today or in the near future that you have had in the time when the first white people came over there and killed about 20 million Native Americans at that time. Even though that he says we should not make the same mistakes again, that's just what he's advocating, and that his policy and the policy of the government of the United States and the government of every country leads to. Building a nation calls us to recognize that we must constantly relate to others, but America is not building a nation anymore. It has already a nation built. Now this nation is being destroyed by this policy of the Antichrist. I think this is very important to analyze what he says here right there. And you know, when the Pope says this is white, you know it's actually black, right? So read it and understand it that way, please. Maybe there are some other comments besides mine here also.
Well, the same thing struck me. You know, we're not one continent, we're two continents. You know, this was a Protestant in the past, and Latin America, as the name implies, was Roman Catholic. And he's trying to, you know, by immigration, make it one, when it was before two. Diametrically opposed, by the way. And I love his statement about it's difficult to judge the past by the criteria of the present.
Boy, that is Jesuit casuistry and sophistry.
At its finest, Walt. Absolutely. This whole paragraph is full of casuistry.
Well, and the reason why they can make a statement to a group of people in America is because America doesn't know the past. That's been taken away. Their heritage has been taken away. You see, it took me, I'm 71 years old, and I grew up, and I was probably not until I was maybe 68 years old that I realized my heritage. Because the average American doesn't know his heritage.
Yeah,
our heritage.
The first part we talked about the education system and how they took history out of there. And when you take the history and the roots out of the people, the culture away from the people, they have no culture, they have no home, they are lost. And they'll all come to daddy.
And our heritage was the Bible prior to 1776. And that's why we speak English. I have even talked to, fellow citizens, around in the town, different people, and I've asked the question, why do we speak English? Why don't we speak German? Because the original 13 colonies was Protestant, and they were from England. And you see one thing that Chris Pinto, I call him the most sophisticated deceiver with material he's put out. And you'll say, well, Walt, that's a pretty large statement. I'll tell you why. If a person doesn't celebrate Christmas, that's all right. I'm not going to throw you under the bus. I'd be real, But we know that where Christmas came from. And the original, what Chris Pinto will never tell you, he spent 2 weekends in a row on his broadcast justifying Christmas. And we said, well, what's got to do with the Pope's speech? Well, prior to 1776, those 13 colonies did not celebrate Christmas. It was even for the next 20, 30 years, America didn't celebrate Christmas. Because, see, it was a superstitious and idolatrous religion. Those Protestants knew what the Royal Declaration said, and they understood the Glorious Revolution. And so, not to just to try to destroy Chris Pinto, but he hasn't come clean because he advocates Christmas. And I said to myself when he did this 2 years ago, I said, well, you'd have been better off, Chris, if you'd have just left it alone. See, if you'd have just left it alone. That isn't the only reason that I call it the most masterful documentary made sophisticated deception was the hidden faith of the Founding Fathers.
Well, you're right, Walt, but you're absolutely going off the subject.
No, I'm not. No, I'm
no?
not.
Where's that related to this then? I want to hear that.
Well, because it goes back to America. He's talking about America. America, that's what America was. And what we see today is what Roman Catholicism has changed. You see, it is very, very important. And that's why the hidden faith of the Founding Fathers is an open door. Doesn't tell you anything. Goes on for 3 hours and talks about the occult. Talks about the occult and the Renaissance and the Enlightenment and Voltaireism, which all come from Jesuitism. And what he did, so I can say this on this broadcast. On another broadcast, I left it open. What is the hidden faith of the Founding Fathers? And it wasn't until this morning that it was given to me. It's Mystery Babylon. The mother of harlots is what founded this country. And if it hadn't been founded, it deals the Pope wouldn't have been able to give a speech.
No, Walt, you're absolutely right. This is also why in Revelation 13 it speaks about the two beasts.
That's right. It was this is probably the biggest deception that the American people cannot wrap their mind around it. They can't, and only
they never will. They never will.
And there's only one way that you can unwrap this. You got to get on your knees and you got to pray, and it's got to be given to you because it's biblical.
Oh, Walt, there you are saying something very interesting. I absolutely agree with you. We all have to become like Daniel in Daniel chapter 9, verse 1 through 23. We all have to humble ourselves like Daniel did if we want a solution for ourselves and our country.
And see, in what founded the hidden faith of the Founding Fathers was universalism. It was universalism was what they founded. It wasn't a Christian document. It was universalism. And Mystery Babylon. Mystery Babylon goes all the way back to the garden. It was the most masterful deception. And how did Satan do it? I've heard this years ago. If you want to destroy somebody, just give them everything they want. And
you Americans got everything.
And Americans, we have been spoiled. We have been spoiled because they give us everything. They give us everything. And in the Pope's visit, I didn't answer my question. I'm going to answer it right now. What has this affected you now, Walt? Now that the Pope has come, well, one of the things is that it validates the hour of the truth. It validates the Grand Design Exposed website. But the main thing it does to me, God, it is written. It is written that there's going to be a new world order. And we're not going to turn it around. And this, to me, has built my strength, my faith, my strength. God is sovereign. He told us. It is written about Mystery Babylon. Read Revelation 17, the mother of harlots. And who is the representative of Mystery Babylon, the mother of harlots?
The guy with the fish head.
The guy with the fish head, the guy that came over here. And not only that, the first one to speak in their temple? See, it's their temple. That's not a Christian temple. He spoke in a basilica. See, so
surrounded by fisheye.
And that's why I say, I get criticized for repeating myself. But you see, I know how painful this pill that I just give you, everybody. Okay, everybody better get a glass of water and swallow the pill, because the pill is, in Americans, Chris Pinto didn't come completely clean. See, he didn't come completely clean. It's by design. This is by design. He mentions the carols one time.
Yeah, he couldn't scare off his sugar daddies, and you know that as well as everybody on this call.
But it's still a masterful look. Look at how. Now, am I saying don't ever listen to anything that Chris Pinto says? No, I'm not saying that. I'm not saying that. But what God has given us is discernment. I've watched the hidden faith of the founding fathers probably 5, 6, 7 times. And I was connecting all the dots on the Grand Design Exposed, and it wasn't until last week that I realized to the full extent the masterful, sophisticated deception, in other words, to give a little bit of information to people instead of giving them all of it. Now, this isn't against Chris Pinto, because there's truth in there's some truth in that hidden faith of the founding fathers. And you're not going to get the truth from Walt Stickle, or York Lisman, or Dave Baxter. The truth is going to come from the Holy Spirit. It's going to come from the Bible. That's where we get this truth. And the Pope's visit, I was ridiculed. 3 years ago on a broadcast, I was ridiculed. I mean, people say to me, well, all you talk about is the Jesuits. Well, they probably had a good point. But it's time to realize it is written. Not Walt Stickle. He didn't write the book. You find yourself following any man, I don't care who it is. How's that go? Let man be true. Let God be true and every man a liar. But when a man says the truth is the truth. The truth will stand by itself. And how do you know it's the truth? Because you've been in the book.
When you can back it up with the Bible, the only truth that is in the world. I
mean, because here this last 3 weeks, I met a man. He was 37 years old. He learned about the founding of this country and some of the founders that have been left out of our history, but he found it on Hour of the Truth. But he knew who the biblical Antichrist was because he knew his Bible. He had been reading his Bible. And all the same thing happened to this man, I'm sure. Is once he understood that it was Mystery Babylon, the mother of harlots, that fomented the American Revolution. It was a counter-Reformation to turn the Protestant Reformation and put the fire completely out. And by the way, it wasn't completely out. I had a man yesterday call me. His name is Richard. That's all I'm going to tell you about him. But he was there in Washington, D.C., and they had a micro, and they were told where they could set up. They were Seventh-day Adventists, but there's such a break in the Seventh-day Adventists. But they were told to write an apology to the papacy. The Seventh-day Adventist. There was one flicker there was a few in Washington, D.C. Praise God. Because the book tells us there's only going to be a remnant of us. I mean, I looked in the room here now. Right now we have 5 listeners. York's one of them. But those 4 listeners that listen this long to this message, I know where their head is at. It's in the book. It's in the Bible. And if I say something that's completely off the wall, I'm going to get an email. So anyway, I appreciate that. I mean, we might, there's a lot to this, but it all goes back. It all goes back to this country and where this country come from. And this Pope's coming over here and doesn't want to talk about, and nobody knows their heritage. It would have never happened. It would have never been possible. But something that came to me, I'm going to repeat it. This came to me. You know how thoughts come to you? Everybody's got it. All of a sudden it comes to you. But they built it. Well, I couldn't. I've read Rulers of Evil, and the construction of and I've been to Washington D.C. in the spring of 1964. I've been there 3 times, and it's kind of interesting. It took 3 lifts to put Freedom up on the top of the Capitol, which is a Virgin Mary, by the way. Read Rulers of Evil. She's facing east also. It took 3 lifts in those days to put her up there. And then they went they painted and they deified, and put old George Washington up in the rotunda. This just came to me. I'm telling you. They built that Capitol. That Capitol building was built for the Pope to visit someday when they had completely destroyed the Protestant Reformation. That was a sign of victory to let a Pope, and they softened it up by 1949 and 1915 when they put in 2 busts of Innocent IX and Gregory IX, 2 of the most mass murderers in history.
Innocent III.
Innocent III, excuse me. Yeah, Innocent III and Gregory IX. And I remember, and listen, I learned this from Chris Pinto. God bless Chris Pinto. I almost fell out of my chair when I learned this about 6 years ago. When he was making that documentary, but it's not in the documentary, okay? It's not in the Hidden Faith of the Founding Fathers. But I learned this through Chris Pinto, because he had a friend that worked inside and got him inside. And so how many people in the United States know that there's 2 busts, 2 popes? I mean, it happened in 1949, okay? They did it in increments. They built that. And then when you read the study and how they built, it took them some 80-some years to build that obelisk. There was quite a battle going up. There was, the Protestants weren't dead. One time when they were building that obelisk at 2 o'clock in the morning, the Pope had the papacy had give a stone to put on the Washington Monument. They were broke in at 2 o'clock in the morning, and they captured that stone and took it out into the Potomac River and dumped it. See, there was people that understood what was going on. So anyway, I think that I overstepped my boundaries a little bit, but that part of history needs to be talked about. I was trying to paint a picture. When you look at this, how can you see anything different? Praise God, though. Our God is sovereign. He is still in command. And we know who the victor is. Thanks, York.
Okay, Walt. Thank you very much for your contribution. And you're right with everything that you said. That's why I let you go. I just wanted to remind you to keep a little eye on the time, which probably you did. It's okay to repeat yourself with these things because these things have to be understood. And to your question, who knows that they were putting up these two pictures of the popes and there in Congress? Well, I can answer at least probably all the people who watched our latest broadcast on Hour of the Truth. Because they sometimes really learn something from these broadcasts, as sometimes I get also written in the comment section on the video. Anyway, we have gone a little over an hour and a half. Going to bring this down, and I'm almost sorry that we only worked on one paragraph on the Pope's speech today. But on the other hand, that will leave us to more probably for next week or another time when Dave will pick that up and read again from the Pope's speech. Dave, is there a closing remark that you want to make to our broadcast today?
It's just when we start again, it'll be real interesting because the second paragraph is very interesting as it relates to the first that we talked about, paragraph we read. So,
well, you can always repeat the paragraph we read today. We don't need to comment on that anymore, and then go to the second if you think that it's appropriate the next time. So,
keep the flow.
Keep the flow. Yeah. Sometimes for continuity's sake, as Tom always says when he does his reading, it is important to back up a paragraph or a sentence or two or whatever. We can do that. So, okay, Dave, thank you very much for your contribution today on Hour of the Truth. And, of course, Walt finally getting over the technical problems and setting the call up a little later than usual, but still, you made it, and you contributed, of course, like always, very important things to the broadcast. I thank all the listeners in the chat room there. Sorry that we started a little bit later than announced, but that was due to technical problems. And I hope to see you again. But I have to tell you already now, if it will be on the 15th of October, a week from now, then it will probably be a little bit later because I have to work before that and can't be here at the usual time. But so we will announce that on the page on the site of Hour of the Truth and Talk Show. So keep an eye on that and the countdown, and we'll probably tell you in time when the broadcast will be starting. So again, Dave, Walt, thank you for your contribution. And thank you for everybody in the chat room for listening and contributing to the broadcast. And until next time, God bless you all and bye-bye.